also lots of good standing room on that side.
Thank you.
Guys are rolling now, I'm sorry.
Okay, we should start. Welcome to Will AI Steal Your Career? The answer is yes. See it. So, as you can see, this graphic was produced by AI in response to the prompt that you see there. So, we're going to be talking about AI and career and what to expect post-Otterbein. But first, we're going to have a quiz. You guys recognize the people on this slide? Who's on the top? Oh, wait. We should start with introductions.
Yeah.
You be in charge. I'm not very good at this.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah, she, her pronouns, and I work here at Otterbein as an educational specialist supporting faculty in their teaching, and I also teach in the IMST program in courses in classical archaeology, so if anyone wants to talk about archaeology later, let me know.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and I do a lot of AI stuff
Yeah.
for faculty. Yeah.
And I'm David Stucki. I'm a professor in computer science, and my graduate research was in AI. And I teach the AI class here within the computer science department. So, sorry about that. Let's talk about this. Who's on the top? Harry Potter. And what is Harry Potter known for? Magic. Who's on the bottom? Penn and Teller. What are they known for? Magic. Is it the same magic? What's the difference between Harry Potter magic and Penn and Teller magic? In Harry Potter's world, which is fictional, but in Harry Potter's world, if you enter Harry Potter's world, magic is real. And the magic that they do actually works, right? Penn and Teller don't live in Harry Potter's world. They live in our world, and they would be the first to tell you that what they do that is called magic is not magic. It's smoke and mirrors, it's illusions, right? They do tricks that make it seem like things are happening that aren't happening. Whereas in Harry Potter's world, when they cast a spell, it actually has the effect that that spell is intended to have. Does that make sense? So, the scientist Arthur C. Clarke, who invented the geosynchronous satellite, was also a science fiction author, said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And AI is one of those technologies that seems magical, right? If you think of magic, though, from the perspective of Harry Potter versus Penn and Teller, what would Harry Potter AI consist of? What would that look like? If AI was like magic in Harry Potter's world, what would AI be? It would be real. It would be intelligent. It would be the real deal, right? It would be what we call artificial general intelligence. It would be machines that can think, machines that are sentient, machines that are conscious and aware of their surroundings, machines that can innovate and create and maybe eventually kill us all. Who knows, right? If you're a fan of the Terminator series. What would Penn and Teller AI consist of? Smoke and mirrors, tricks, things that make you think that something real is happening when really there's nothing behind the curtain, right? That it's a set of tricks and elaborate ruses that give you this sense of reality without the reality actually being there. Does that make sense? Having been in the field of AI for almost 40 years, I will tell you that all AI is Penn and Teller. There is no Harry Potter AI. That AI is a bunch of smoke and mirrors, it's a bunch of tricks, it's a bunch of technologies that make things appear to be smart and intelligent when there's nobody home inside. You knock on the door and there's no AI that's understanding or thinking or doing anything. It's a bunch of illusion. Does that make sense? Okay? Just as another metaphor, another framework to think about, it used to be in the old days that special effects in movies were done by camera tricks and props and analog technology. The original Star Wars movie was all analog. There were no digital special effects in that movie. But these days, all movies have digital special effects. When they introduced CGI to movies, did that make the movies more real? Are movies that have CGI in them movies that are depicting things that are actually true and authentic? Or is it just more of a persuasive fiction? Does that make sense?
Awesome. So really quickly, we're going to kind of get everyone on the same page about what generative AI is. So I really like this kind of definition where it's any program that makes use of algorithms to create something new, right? And we put new in scare quotes because it's not actually something new, right? It's just kind of putting ideas together, perhaps in different ways. So when we talk about generative artificial intelligence, it all starts from large language models. And these large language models, essentially, they're just trained on massive amounts of data, a massive amount of writing, right? And they take all of this writing, and from that, we're able to create these generative AI tools that you give it a text prompt, and it gives you a text output, right? So these are some of your basic tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Scribe, Cloud, right? There's a lot of different ones. But it's a text prompt, and it gives you a text output. And essentially what it's doing is it's reading your prompt, and then it's saying, okay, based on the massive amount of human writing that I've been trained on, here's the most likely way to respond to those set of words that you gave me, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in a second. From these large language models, we're then able to create these diffusion models. And this is where I think AI is very fun, right? This is when we get into the things where you give it a text prompt and you get something else as an output. So you might get images, PowerPoint slides, videos, all sorts of other types of things, right? So you're giving it a text prompt and then you're getting something else in return instead of text in return. So these are tools like Canva or Copilot, right? Different image generators, video generators, where it does all of this kind of, based on the large language model, right? Then we use that to create something different.
So how many of you have used one of these tools? We're not
judging you.
We're not judging, we're not keeping track, we're not going to report you to anybody. So a large number of you have used these tools. How do they work? That may be a question that you've never looked into or asked yourself. I drive a car, I'm not a mechanic, I don't know anything about how cars work, so it's perfectly reasonable to use tools in our society without knowing how they work. But just to give you a big picture idea of how large language models work, I want to tell you a story about an assignment I gave in one of my introductory programming classes. I asked my students to write a program, and they have about a week to do this, and this is typically freshmen or sophomores who are doing this. So this is not people who have years of experience writing code and developing software. This is a fairly elementary assignment that I give. I give them the task of creating a ghostwriter. Their program will read the full text of the Alice in Wonderland book by Lewis Carroll, and it will build a statistical model of how Lewis Carroll wrote the book. And more specifically, what it does is for every word in the book, it will make a list of all of the other words that ever come after that word. So if there's a word and another word that comes after it, that gets added to the statistical model. And then their program, once they've built that model, starts generating random text from the model. And it doesn't make any sense. It's largely gibberish. But surprisingly, it sounds almost grammatical. It reads somewhat naturally. It's not perfect, but this is a 1-week assignment to freshmen and sophomores. But it's surprising how much you can accomplish. So here's a sample output from one of my students' submissions to me. Alice ventured to ask for one with pink eyes, full effect. The words "drink me" were taken advantage. And then the mock turtle replied, counting off the hatter and perhaps your pocket. Now, I have no idea what that means, but it's surprising that it almost sounds like English. It's following the grammatical structure of English, and it's faulty and it's imperfect, but it's not bad for a 1-week assignment for students who never knew how to code before. And so this is really what ChatGPT is doing. You type text at it, and it's already built a model of the English language. And in response to your text, it's generating random responses based on the prompt that you gave it. And so if you add billions of dollars and tens of years to the effort beyond this week that I give my students, you can get something that's pretty amazing. And so all of these large language models that Sarah was talking about, all they're ever doing is finishing your sandwiches, sentences. Right. Sorry about the Frozen reference. Okay. If you want a little bit more insight into what's going on, this XKCD cartoon talks about the mathematical details. So this is your machine learning system. Yep, you pour the data into this big pile of linear algebra, a branch of mathematics, and then collect the answers on the other side. Well, what if the answers are wrong? Well, you just stir the pile until they start looking right. That's pretty accurate. It's pretty dead on to how ChatGPT works.
So just to kind of reiterate that these large language models, they're essentially just using predictive models, right? We're saying what is the most likely thing to come next in the sequence of words. And so that does lead to some very distinct challenges and limitations when we're talking about these AI tools. And this is an image generated by Copilot. One of my colleagues at a prior institution created this with the prompt, AI is like a child. Has anyone ever had a conversation with a 5-year-old? Mm-hmm. Had a conversation with a 5-year-old or other young child? Yeah. You know, they love to tell you a story, and then they just keep talking about it, and you're like, that never happened. Like, there's no way that happened. That is not a real thing that happened. That's what AI does sometimes. It's like a child. It's very confident about its story, but its story isn't necessarily 100% accurate.
And AI will often, and a child will often lose the plot.
Yes, it can stray off from it. So some of the things just to keep in mind, it is convincingly natural with less obvious errors. That's why the release of ChatGPT was such an explosive thing, is because it was one of these large language models that sounds so convincingly real. And everything it tells you, it says with confidence, right? And so that's one of the big challenges, is when you read output from a generative AI, very often it's easy to believe it because it sounds so confident about what it's saying. And that means when it's not accurate about something, it's less obvious. It doesn't stand out as obviously. It's also constantly learning and can get worse. So the more we interact with generative AI, the more it continues to learn from the things that we're telling it, and humans are very flawed, right? And so sometimes we might say things that are not accurate, and then the AI is still learning from that. They actually did a study, and after the initial release of ChatGPT, it got worse at responding to prompts within like 6 months of people interacting with it, right? So it continues to get worse as it interacts with us. There's also issues with authorship and copyright. If something is written by generative AI, who owns that writing? We don't really know. And that's something we're really struggling to grapple with. And so it creates a challenge. It's also a problem because AI can plagiarize without necessarily realizing or acknowledging that it is plagiarizing, right? So that also creates a lot of issues. It can't have ownership. It is a machine. It can't have ownership of its writing. So that creates a lot of challenges.
And there are numerous lawsuits in the courts right now about, did AI plagiarize its training data from copyright holders?
Yes. So there's a lot of issues with, like, did authors give consent for their work to be used to train AI models, right? Those kinds of questions. And then there's also just a really major concern we have around generative AI tools, which is that they tend to amplify bias. They also tend to lack an international perspective. A lot of the AI models that we use here in the US were largely trained on American-produced writing, right? So it lacks that more international perspective. But again, AI can amplify bias. I had a colleague at prior institution who was a woman who worked as a biology faculty member. She asked AI to write a poem about a biologist or a biology lab, and in the poem it said, if you see a woman there wearing an apron, she's probably there to clean, right? Implying that bias that women don't belong in science, right? That's a problem, right? And that's the kind of thing that can happen with some of these generative AI tools, because they aren't thinking critically about the output that's being produced. We have this really great example. The prompt was, please generate an illustrated poster to help children learn which sounds common animals make. Each animal should be pictured with a speech bubble spelling out the animal's sound.
There's no problem. There's nothing wrong with it. Is it okay?
Where's the
chicken's
bottom
my
of saying?
favorite.
Is that
It's not quite
Just
fully
like
formed the
this one.
letter.
Yeah.
and
He's
then
also,
the thing to the right of that is the speech bubble.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
He's in a speech bubble, yeah.
I really like
I love
the
the chicken frog is my favorite.
chicken frog. That's Kermit.
On the bottom, like on the bottom row, on the
Yeah.
second, what is that one there?
This one?
Yeah, what is that one?
Great question. It's like a sheep with a beak.
Oh.
So,
This looks like a platypus.
I like the sheep horse. It's like a horse.
The sheep horse that says ba, the pig that says Kamola.
Yeah, what's with that?
I mean, this is, yeah, and the arms are horrifying, right? So, the AI isn't checking its work, right? All it is doing is just smushing together things based on its training, right? It's doing its best to try to fit ideas and concepts together, smushing them together. It's not thinking critically about what that output actually is.
It's building the product out of a statistical model that it doesn't understand itself. It has no understanding of what any of this is about or what it means. It's just crunching a bunch of math to get the answer.
Also, why is there a bunch of music?
Well, hold your question. We'll take questions. Okay, so what does this mean for you? You guys are in the middle of your college career. You're going to be graduating in 2 or 3 years and entering the workforce. What does this mean for you? Sarah found this great cartoon. Who are we? CEOs. What do we want? AI. AI to do what? We don't know. When do we want it? Right now. Right. That's pretty much, I do, in addition to being here at Otterbein, I do consulting in the industry. And this is a pretty accurate representation of what managers and CEOs are doing these days. They're crying for AI because they think AI is a silver bullet. It's going to solve all of their problems, but they don't know what it is. And there's this really interesting disconnect between the people who are pouring money into using AI and their understanding of what it is that they're buying. So some things that we should know as you're thinking about life after Otterbein is that AI, for its entire history, AI started in 1950, it's 75 years old, and for its entire history, it's been cyclical. There have been booms where there's a lot of money, a lot of excitement, a lot of buzz, and then there are busts where the money dries up and the research goes away and it goes into hibernation for sometimes as much as 10 years. And we are currently at the peak of a boom. That's why there's all this buzz. That's why we're doing this session, is that everyone's talking about AI. There's a lot of excitement over ChatGPT that came out 3 years ago, right? Not even 3 years ago. We're not always going to be at the peak of a boom. There's going to be a bust, and there won't be as much buzz and excitement about AI at some point in the future. We don't know when that is, but it's going to be cyclical. It's going to go back to being less prevalent and prominent in society than it is now, but it's never going to go completely away. You're always going to have to deal with it at some level. Some jobs may be lost to AI. There's a lot of debate and a lot of conflict about what AI is going to do to the job market. The most extreme predictions is that AI is going to replace all of our jobs, that we're all going to become superfluous and we're not going to be able to find work. I think those claims are heavily overstated. I think there will be some job loss, but it's not nearly as bad as they're making it out to be, and we're starting to see some evidence of that in the last year. Largely the tasks that will be replaced are the ones that don't require human thinking, that don't require judgment and understanding and critical analysis and the human element. The things that can be easily automated or replicated, the things that are redundant and tedious for humans, those will be easy to replace. Okay? I think more likely than losing jobs or replacing jobs, we're going to see jobs that become adapted to AI, that the workforce will adapt itself to the technologies that are in existence, and that as a graduate of Otterbein, you're going to have to develop some skills and some ability to use AI in your job in certain ways that maybe people 5-10 years ago didn't have to do. And so it's going to become part of the skill set, just like word processing wasn't always part of people's skill sets, and using spreadsheets wasn't always part of people's skill sets. Using AI is going to be just one of those things that's in the bucket that you have to learn and accept in the workplace. To illustrate that, I have this quote posted on the door of my office. Jeff Hinton, I knew of Jeff Hinton 30 years ago when I was in graduate school. He was a big shot then, he's a big shot now. He's worked for Google, he won prestigious awards. In 2016, he said, we need to stop training radiologists because AI is going to take over reading radiology reports. And people took him seriously, and so enrollment in schools that trained radiologists started to drop. And Gary Marcus pointed out earlier this year that not a single radiologist has been replaced by AI, but now we have a shortage of radiologists. And so you have to take with a grain of salt the dire predictions of job loss, because it can actually cause problems if we overcorrect. Okay.
And I'll just, my partner is a radiologist, right? Like, he works at Ohio State. Ohio State is on the leading, like, all of the AI research around radiology has been completely stalled. So not only is it not replacing jobs, but they don't even think there's a chance of it replacing, even supporting jobs for another 20 years, right? So those predictions can be really,
Yeah. And so, no, that's great. And I think we're in a point in time where this cartoon makes a lot of sense. Every time you have a new technology, you think that technology is going to solve everything, right? If you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, here's someone coming to the workplace with an AI hammer and says, I think I have a solution to our problems, but all of the problems on the table are screws, not nails, right? And I think that's kind of where we are. What are the biggest misunderstandings about AI? Number one, AI can innovate. That's not true. Everything that AI does is derivative. It builds a model off of human artifacts, and then it starts reproducing things that follow the patterns of what it was trained on, but it doesn't innovate anything. AI can solve problems that we can't. We don't have any evidence that AI is going to be able to do things beyond what humans can do, because everything that AI has done to date is stuff that we already know how to do. It just does it faster, it does it more efficiently, it does it in ways that save us a lot of time and thinking, and in ways that encourage us to be lazy, but it doesn't actually go beyond our abilities at this point. And then AI understands what it's doing is a misconception. It doesn't. AI is a mathematical model that doesn't think, it doesn't understand, it just crunches the numbers. So when you go to the workplace, I think the first thing that you need to start thinking about is, what are your own personal beliefs and criteria for how you use AI? What are your ethical guidelines? What is it that you're willing to do? What is it that you're not willing to do? You need to come up with some framework for understanding how you personally interact with and engage with AI that's part of your own personal belief system, your own personal practices. And then when you go to the workforce, you might find that those are not aligned with your employer. The employer might have expectations that are different than yours. And it could go either way. You might embrace AI and your employer is skittish and doesn't want you to use it. Or you might decide for very good reasons that you're not going to use AI in certain ways, but your employer is pressuring you to do it. And you need to, if you don't know what you think going in, it's going to be hard for you to navigate those conversations with your boss or with your manager. And then I think the best advice I can give is, you need to learn how to be indispensable. You need to develop skills using AI that make you productive without violating your ethical principles. But you also need to be aware that to succeed in the workplace moving forward, you're going to be in situations where you have to be willing to be out of your comfort zone. You have to be willing to learn things that you don't know. You have to be willing to say yes to things that you don't know how to do, but you'll figure them out. as you go, and AI can help sometimes with that.
So what does this mean for all of you? So just to kind of reiterate some of these things, and then we'll look at some examples of how you can start to form your own sense of kind of ethical guidelines around generative AI. You are responsible for understanding expectations around the use of generative AI in all contexts. It is your responsibility to understand that. It is not enough to just say, well, I'm only using it this way, so it's fine. No, you have to understand the expectations of your workspace, and that also applies to your classrooms. I would just mention that since we're still in classes right now. It is your responsibility to understand what those expectations are. And if you don't understand those expectations, just ask questions, right? There's a lot of AI tools out there. They have been sneaking AI into everything. I just today or yesterday there was like a new Gemini button built into Google Chrome. And I was like, I didn't ask for this, and I unpinned it and made it go away, right? But it's being built into everything. And so you have to understand what those expectations are. Grammarly used to just correct your grammar. Now it is using generative AI tools to do that, right? Is that okay? Or is that something that crosses the line, right? So understanding those expectations. But more importantly, you are responsible for your own work. So if you are submitting something, if you're submitting an assignment, if you're submitting a report at work, right, and they are expecting it to be something that you produced, and you use a generative AI tool that gets things wrong, that's not the AI's fault, that's your fault. And you are responsible for that work. So you have to remember that the things that you produce, that is your responsibility, even if you use a generative AI tool, work with a generative AI tool. You're responsible for any errors, and you're also responsible for verifying information. Has anyone ever tried to use AI to like write something with citations? Has anyone played with this? Check it out, it's very funny. Does a very bad job because it makes up citations. So if you ask it to write a report, write an essay and include citations, it'll make up citations. So that's a problem. You need to verify the information. You need to verify the information that's there. If you use AI and it tells you some ideas, don't just believe it. Ask questions. Where did this come from? Right? It's your responsibility to develop those critical thinking skills to really work effectively with these tools.
And it doesn't just make up citations, it makes up all kinds of other facts
Yep.
and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So,
All right, so I have this list of what I call a responsible use protocol. These are kind of guiding questions that you should think about when you're engaging with the generative AI tool. All right, so just things for you to think about. The first one is, I understand how the tool works, including its capabilities and limitations? If you can't answer yes to that question, you might want to rethink your engagement with that tool. Right? I understand the terms, conditions, and privacy policies associated with this tool. This is especially important if you're going to be engaging with generative AI tools in the workforce, is there's a lot of proprietary information or personal identification information that you should not be putting into a generative AI tool. Right? That's been a big issue at a university, for example, where we all have access to certain amounts of data about people who work at the university. I can't take that information and put it into an AI, because the AI isn't going to learn that information, that private information about people. And so it's really important to make sure you understand those policies. I use the AI tool to enhance my thinking and creativity, not to replace it. This is something I think is one of the most important things we should be thinking about, right? The importance of the human element, what we are able to bring to our work. We don't want to offload our thinking onto a generative AI tool. I use the AI tool only when it's been explicitly allowed and do not assume it's permitted in all contexts. We talked about that. I treat AI output as a secondary source of information that's not always accurate and take steps to critically evaluate its output. So again, making sure we're verifying everything that AI says. I reflect on my own use of the AI tool throughout the process. So taking the time to stop and think, have I forgotten some of these things as I engage more and more deeply with the generative AI tool? And then finally, and I think most importantly, I am transparent about where, how, and why I use the tool. If you are using generative AI to support your work in any way, you need to be transparent about how you have used it. It is pretty akin to plagiarism if you are not citing your sources, right? And then giving acknowledgement to the fact that you use generative AI is just as important. Do you have anything to add to this?
no, I think those are great.
Yeah.
I agree.
So take a picture of it, reflect on this, remember this. You can use it in the workforce, you can use it in classrooms. Does anyone want a picture of it before I make the slide go away? So I think this is useful. Questions you should be asking yourselves as you use generative AI tools. Let's be critical thinkers. Got a few pictures. All right. So, we have 10 minutes.
We do.
We have time for this.
Okay.
Yeah? So, we're going to give you a few scenarios. I just want you to vote thumbs up, thumbs down. And the question is this use of AI okay? All right, these are all just examples from workplace. Sound good? First one. Writing an email to a client that explains company policies. Is this use of AI okay? Thumbs up or thumbs down? See them. Hold them up. Thumbs up, thumbs down. We have lots of thumbs downs. Does anyone want to defend this use of AI? No? Does anyone want to elaborate on why they gave it a thumbs down? Yeah?
It might not be accurate.
Sorry?
It might not be accurate. It might not be the right policy.
So it might not be an accurate representation of the policies? Yeah? Okay. And there's no right answers to these, right? This is about you developing your own sense of what is right and wrong around using generative AI tools. Writing an email to a client in response to a complaint. Does this change things for you? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Is this use of AI okay? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Come on, you all have hands. I know you have thumbs. Thumbs up or thumbs down? All right. I'm seeing more variety that time. Someone who says, yes, this is okay. Why do you say this version's okay?
So I work for McGraw-Hill, and I've dealt with like angry customers before, and sometimes I do have trouble trying to figure out what to say to the end user. Sometimes I do consult with my team members and ask them what to say, and then I do use Gen AI, and then I might make my own modifications to make it more human-like, the way how I would say it.
Yeah. So, right, one way that it might be useful in this case is the AI could help you maybe adjust the tone. I have a colleague who really struggles with writing emails sometimes, and so she'll write a draft of the email and then get the AI to help her edit it and make sure it has the appropriate tone, right? So maybe that's a way that would be appropriate to use it. Drafting a report for your supervisor. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Can you use AI to help with this? All right. We have conflict right in the front row.
It specifically says drafting, not final.
Okay. So maybe it's the difference of I'm okay with the use of AI if it's an initial draft, but not for creating a final product, right? That might be a place. Developing PowerPoint slides based on your own presentation outline. Thumbs up or thumbs down? How do we feel about this? Use of AI. Thumbs up or thumbs down? You all have hands. Thumbs up or thumbs down? How do we feel about this? Using AI to develop PowerPoint slides? Yeah, I see a lot of thumbs up. I see some thumbs down. Right? So again, just thinking about why you feel this way. I wouldn't. I love making PowerPoint slides. It's something I enjoy doing. But if I had created a presentation outline and then the AI just created the slides and then I could go back in and edit them, maybe that would save me some time, right? Depending on what my workflow looks like. All right, creating an image to include on a PowerPoint slide. Maybe. Does it depend on the context? Yeah, okay. Right, so we're starting to see there's a lot of gray area here. For the sake of time, we'll move forward, but just things for you to be thinking about, right? There's not a right or wrong answer for most uses of generative AI. There's a lot of gray area, right?
And let me just add, we had a conversation right before you guys all came in. I think the model that I like for using these kinds of tools is I do the work myself first, and then I ask a generative AI what they would do, and then I compare what they suggest with what I've already done, and sometimes that gives me some ideas of what I missed, or how to change the tone, or how to use a different image. But I do the creative work myself first, and then I use the AI as a self-check.
Awesome. All right, I thought it was going to immediately start playing.
No.
Okay.
So there are some potential costs to AI. And we don't have time to go through all of these, but you can see I've got a list of different potential pitfalls that we can fall into in using AI. We found this video put out by Business Insider that talks a little bit about it that we'd like to play real quick.
Let's talk about the real life consequences of AI that are happening right now. So the AI that you're using, your social media apps, it doesn't exist in a cloud. It exists in a data center. What look like giant warehouses, but they really have all of these servers. One critical thing is the amount of electricity that these data centers require. Business Insider calculated as a range. On the low end, that's as much as the state of Ohio used in 2023, their entire electricity use. On the high end, it's about as much as Florida used in that same year. So let's talk about data centers' impact on local economies. All of these different cities across the country are racing to have data centers built in their areas. In Ohio, cities are making these deals with large companies like Amazon that are very profitable. What we found is that for every full-time, long-term job that's employed in a data center, Amazon might be saving as much as $1 million in taxes that they don't pay to the state or cities. And what jobs do come from data centers are pretty much in their construction and wrap up long before your economic development deal is done. And data centers are also contributing in major ways to air and water pollution. Because of data centers' skyrocketing electricity demand, a lot of utilities are starting to say, we can't meet this demand without relying more and more on fossil fuels. So this is causing more and more air pollution. The power generation for these data centers could contribute $5.7 to $9.2 billion of annual public health costs, in numbers of hundreds of thousands of additional asthma cases that can be wheezing, tightness of the chest, difficulty breathing, and can be hundreds of additional deaths each year. And what is it like living next to these giant data centers? So these residents are living right next to these industrial facilities that are running 24/7, and they're making this really ominous drone noise. So it's a constant noise of their cooling fan. Some residents told us that they can actually hear it inside their houses, and some had to sleep in the basement because they couldn't sleep. And how are data centers deepening the water crisis? So to power those data centers, you need a huge amount of electricity, and those servers get really hot, so you need something to cool them. Sometimes data centers are using water to cool their servers. They're finicky drinkers. They only really want to use drinking water. Data centers are competing directly with residents who are living in the desert where there's already not enough water to go around. Business Insider requested records of how much water every data center is using, got a lot of redacted records, and in 2 cases, cities actually sued us to prevent the release of those records. There's a lot of interest in the promise of AI, but the costs are already right here, and they're impacting us today.
Okay. That's a very quick, we didn't have time to really get into a lot of the things that we could have said, but we're open to take questions. We got about 2 minutes. Do you have a question?
So you're saying that they're not thinking for themselves. How do we explain the rapid increase of understandability of the AI in terms of its generative capabilities?
Yeah, there were some technological breakthroughs that happened in 2021 and 2022 that made the output of the generative AI large language models suddenly feel more human-like. It would take a long time to explain why those are still smoke and mirrors and tricks, but there's a great website that I would encourage you to go to called AI Weirdness. If you just Google AI Weirdness, it documents a lot of the evidence that as you probe the large language models, they clearly don't know what they're talking about, and they don't really understand anything. And, another person that you can follow on Substack if you're interested in hearing more about an AI skeptic, who's actually an AI researcher, he works in the field. You can look up Gary Marcus on Substack, and he has some information about why the models aren't really understanding what they're doing. Omar.
So when it comes to career choices,
Yeah.
does it matter which one it is, no matter what, you can take over AI, or there's probably some careers that you don't need to worry about it?
I'll speak from my limited knowledge of this. I'll say I think computer scientists are safe. All of the hype that AI is going to replace coders, I think, is misguided, and I don't think it will. And there might, between now and when most of you graduate, there might be some companies that try to replace coders with AI, but by the time you graduate, they'll find out that that was a bad move, and there will be a demand for coders. I don't know if you have
Yeah, I would
insights
just
or-
say, I think the more important takeaway isn't thinking about like, oh, that specific career path is gonna be annihilated by generative AI. And I think it's more important to think about what are the skills that you are bringing that could work alongside generative AI tools that make
Yeah.
you indispensable as a person, right? I think where we see the biggest risk, I worked in an institution, a huge journalism program. I think journalists are afraid, right? I think kind of writing intensive spaces are afraid. But again, we're not at the point right now, and it's very likely we're starting to see a lot of pushback around the generative AI, use of generative AI to replace a lot of these positions, and instead people are more interested in how productive it can be when people work alongside the tools in a responsible manner.
AI is great at writing the kinds of documents and reports that no one ever wants to read.
Yeah.
But the kind of human reporting and human writing that gets a lot of interest from society, I don't think AI is good at that.
Yeah.
So. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you have any advice on telling the difference between AI and like real letter writing or like?
that's a good
That's a
question.
great question. There are lots of resources that talk about that. I don't have any of them at my fingertips. We both would be happy to talk to anybody about AI beyond this session. So Sarah's in the library, I'm in the comm building. Feel free to stop by anytime if you have additional questions about this. You all need to scan this QR code in order to get attendance credit.
Scan the QR code before you leave.